Hello, class. On Friday, we talked about the direct method for allocating support department costs. And under the direct method, we basically assign department costs to the production departments, and we do not distribute any of the support department costs to the other support department. So in this case, we've got Antique Charm that has two support departments, machine maintenance and human resources, that they need to distribute with a total of $300,000 in cost. So we're going to walk through here how to distribute this $300,000. So they're asking what amount of machine maintenance costs will be allocated to the furniture department. So here we've got furniture and we've got decor. Now, HR costs for the year are $150,000 and machine maintenance is $300,000, so a total of $450,000. And since we are doing the direct method, we are going to look here at machine maintenance, and we want to know how much of that is going over here to furniture. Now, machine maintenance is allocated based on the number of budgeted machine hours. So the first thing we want to do is look at the departments that we're going to be allocating this to and say, hey, how many machine hours do we have? And what portion of it goes to each department. So furniture has 18,000. This total here is wrong. I don't know what's up with that, but we've got 18,000 and 2,000. So 18,000 machine hours, 2,000 machine hours for a total of 20,000 machine hours. That means that machine maintenance is going to be 18,000 divided by 20, that's 180. 18,000 divided by 20,000. So 90% of them go to machine maintenance, and then the remaining 10% go here. So 2,000 divided by 20,000. Okay. So figuring out what percentage goes to each. And then once you do that, all you do is apply that to the amount that you're distributing here, right? So, oops, this is supposed to be furniture. Sorry. So we're distributing $300,000. We're just going to take that $300,000 that we're distributing, and we're going to multiply it times that 90% or 0.9, which gets us 270,000. And so over here, then, the 300,000 times 0.1 would be 30,000 for, and then if we add those together, right, our numbers, that gets us to the full $300,000 that we would want to distribute. So I do recommend when you're doing these problems to always check these. Oops, I should have put some commas in there. Easier to read. That was the whole reason I did that. Okay. So that gets us to the total distribution of $300,000 when we're looking at those two. Now, they're just asking us about the furniture department only. So our answer would just be this 270,000. Okay. So it's the direct method. It's pretty simplified. The next method I want to talk about is called the step-down method here. Okay, there, I got my screens figured out here. So the step-down method is a method where we allocate, we pick an order to allocate out our support departments. And the very first ones that we allocate actually get allocated to the other support departments as well as our production departments. And then you kind of work your way down the list, gradually allocating everything out. Now, here we've got a company, Stokes, and 25% of their HR resources are expended on their custodial services because they allocate based on employees. 10 of the employees in the company are custodial services workers. And so when they calculate out the percentage to assign, the denominator, this bottom number, is all of the employees other than the HR department. Okay. Because you aren't going to allocate costs to yourself. So here we've got human resources with $180,000 worth of support department costs to allocate, and they're going to allocate to all three other departments if the human resources allocates first. So they're going to allocate to market research, public relations, and custodial services. And then after that, then custodial services will allocate their costs, but they're not going to allocate upwards to human resources. It just flows downhill. So custodial services will then distribute to market research and public relations, which are the remaining two departments. So what that looks like for the human resources, so 10 employees are in custodial services. So we take their 180,000 and then we multiply it times 10 divided by 40 or 25%. Market research has 20 employees out of the 40. So we take 180,000 and multiply it times their 20 out of 40. And then same thing for public relations. All right. And then when we get to the custodial services here, as I said, that $120,000 is going to get allocated out to market research and public relations. So the denominator for the custodial services is just going to be the 30 employees, which was 20 in market research and 10 in public relations. Um, so, so looking at that, right? If we add up here, let's see, in total, we're going to assign out not just the original custodial services, so we also have to allocate out the human resources that were assigned to custodial services. So when we look at this from a math perspective here, right? Let me find my pencil here, right? So we've got 120,000 originally for custodial services, but then they had this $45,000 that was assigned to them from human resources. So that actually gets us to 165,000 at that point that is sitting in here. So we're going to cross that out and put 165,000, right? Now, for the market research, let me just double check on this. Yeah, 20 and 10 employees, or let's see, actually, and they're based on, I'm sorry, custodial services also is based on square footage, not on people. So way back in our earlier slide here, now that I remember, we had, let me just delete this. So they're going to allocate that based on square footage. So you're going to take the square footage from those two separate departments, right? Here's the allocation of the HR costs, which we already did. So the 180 got put into custodial services, market research, and public relations here. And then we've got our $165,000 of custodial services costs that have to get allocated. Now, we had 700 square feet and 500 square feet, a total of 1,200. So we're going to take 700 divided by 1,200 here, and we're going to take 500, sorry, this should be over here, 500 divided by 1,200 here. So running that math really quick. That gets us to 0.5833 for production department and 0.4167 here, right? If we take those then and we multiply that times that 165,000. I'm going to put a K there instead of 1,000. That gets us to 96,000, 244.50 here, and then I think I did that. Let's see. So 0.4167 So 68,755. So they're rounding it to the nearest, um, rounding it to the nearest thousand here. So that gets, yeah, so 96,000 and 68,000 when it's rounded to the nearest thousand. All right, so that's how we do the math on that one. So let's walk through. I have actually two problems on this topic. Oops, hold on. Let me just delete all these because otherwise they're going to stick in here. All right, so for problem number 4, we have Title Splash Company with 2 support departments, engineering and human resources. And engineering costs are 1.8 million, allocated on number of budgeted labor hours expected for each department. So we're going to be allocating this 1.8 million here, and we want to look at the budgeted labor hours expected. We're going to be looking at these numbers, whoops, right up here. So a total of 15,000 hours there. So 6,000 plus 9,000. And actually, sorry, let me see here. Yeah, and they're excluding obviously their own hours, and there's no labor hours here for human resources. So we don't, if human resources had labor hours, we would include them, but they don't. So we're leaving that out. Okay. So, and let's see, engineering costs. Yes. So engineering allocates prior to human resources. So even if human resources had hours there, we would allocate it based on there. Okay. So we've got 15,000 hours, and they are asking how many should we allocate to boards. So we're going to just do this. In this case, it actually works out very similarly to the direct method because we have a total of 15,000 hours here. Since there's no hours in human resources, we aren't allocating any to them. Okay. So 40% of the costs are going to get assigned to the board department. So that gets us $720,000. Okay. Now, if we were also going to allocate the human resources department on this problem, what we would do then, so they allocate based on employee headcount. And so they aren't going to allocate upwards to engineering services because, so they're ranked number 2, human resources goes next. So they would not send anything to engineering services. All right. So it would, again, it would be very similar to the direct method here when you're doing your last department. But the human resources department, by the way, so they got allocated none of the engineering services. So they actually would only be allocating out their 240,000. So watching out for that. So head count for the production departments is 24 total. So the boards department would get 10 divided by 24 or 4.1667. They would get about 750,000 for, whoops, that's not right. Oh yeah, yeah. So 750 plus 720. Oh, coming up. Yeah, and then the remainder would go over to, wait, I multiplied that times the wrong number. Sorry, that should be the 240. There we go. Human resources, 100,000 of it would go to the boards department, and then the remaining would go to the slides department. So this one, let's jump to problem number 9 because it's actually a complete step down problem that asks about each department, and that'll be a little bit more conclusive here. Sorry, and this one was the 700. 20,000, just in case anyone didn't catch that there. All right, but jumping forward to problem number 9, which is another step down problem. We've got Posh Bakery with 2 support departments. They've got machine maintenance and human resources. And for the machine maintenance department, they've got 500,000 here, and then they've got 200,000 for human resources based on machine hours over here. And then the HR costs are 200,000 and they're allocated based on headcount. Okay. So I'm going to put HC there for headcount. And then we're going to allocate these out to their production departments, pies and cakes. So they allocate human resource costs first. So we're going to do that first here. I'm going to put that up here, and I'm going to put the machine maintenance down here. All right. Now for the human resources, right? We're going to be looking at assigning these human resources costs out to all of the other departments. All right. So in order to do this, let's map this out here. So we're going to have a total of 40 plus 40 plus 20. And I typoed that. There we go. So 100 is the head count that we're distributing the human resources costs over. Okay. And that gives us the total. So then for machine maintenance and for pies, because we want to distribute it to all the remaining ones if we're doing this one first. And since they all have head count, they will all get a part of them. We're going to take, which is the number that of head count that are here in machine maintenance, and we're going to divide that, or I'm sorry, multiply for 20 divided by 100, so 1/5 times the human resources. That's the amount that will go to machine maintenance. All right. So now we're going to look at what goes out to pies. Okay. So for pies, it's going to be 40 divided by 100 times the 200,000. And then for cake, wow, look at my typing here. Cakes, it's going to be 40 divided by 100 again. All right, so when we add those all up here, right, 200,000 is the total. All right, that's all distributed out. Okay, now though, machine maintenance originally had 500,000 plus we have the HR allocated that came to them, right? So the HR part that came to machine maintenance was 40,000. And so that means we need to allocate out 540,000. Okay, not just the original 500,000. So with that, we are going to assign out two these based on machine hours. So looking at machine hours, we had 15,000 for pies and 5,000 for cakes. So a total of 20,000 because we're not going to allocate to ourselves. So we're ignoring that and it's just going to go out. So for pies, it's going to be the 15,000 divided by 20,000. We're going to multiply that times the 540,000. And I forgot an equal sign there. Over here so you can see what I'm doing there. And then for cakes, it's going to be the, um, let's see here, 5,000. So we're going to assign a 405,000 plus 135,000. And so when we add that up, that gets us to our 540,000. All right. Now, so the total that got assigned to each of these, right? Each department we assigned from HR and we assigned from machine maintenance. Okay. So up here, we assigned these amounts to pies and cakes from HR. They each got 80,000 because they had similar headcount. And then down here, we assigned these amounts from machine maintenance. Oops, I'm doing the wrong column here. Pies was 405,000. There we go. So the total amount that was allocated to each department was 215,000 and 485,000 for pie. Okay. All right. So that's the step down method, right? So first you allocate the first department. And then you allocate the next department, including what they were allocated. All right. And then last, we add up all the separate allocations for each department. Okay. For pies, we had 485,000, and for cakes, we had 215,000. Okay, that is the step down method. So now we're going to talk about one last method that's out there that we have called the reciprocal method. So under the reciprocal method, basically each of the support departments assigns part of their cost out upfront, taking their original costs and assigning it, and ignoring any later distributions. So what that looks like is, so the human resources department uses 20% of Stokes Marketing's square footage, right? So they would get assigned 20% of the original custodial cost before anything else is distributed. And then custodial services, because they use 10 out of the 40 employees that are not in HR, they would upfront get 1/4 of the HR cost assigned to them. And then each of those departments would assign out to the production departments and ignore each other, just like a direct method. So the first step is you just cross assign part of your original cost of the different departments. And then you just go straight out to the production departments. So the formula, if we were to put this in an equation form, would look like this. So HR is 180,000 plus 20% of the custodial costs, original custodial costs. And then for custodial, it would be their 120,000 plus 25% of the original HR cost. And we ignore their cross distributions when we do that. Okay. So, so looking at that, the custodial costs then would be you would solve out for the amount that would be assigned to each department by solving for the variable that's associated with it. So, um, looking here, they're saying plug the cost of the human resources equation into the cost of the custodial services equation. So we had this, let me just take a quick screenshot of that. 180,000 plus 0.2C. All right. And I wish I had the equation on here. 1 second. Okay, I added the formula onto the slide since we're not doing this in class and I don't have a blackboard where I can add this in as clearly. So on our earlier slide, we had this formula for each of these, right? So the human resources cost is going to be $180,000 plus 20% of the custodial cost. The custodial cost is going to be $120,000 plus 25% of the human resources cost. However, what we need to do then is to take the formula from the human resources and insert it into the custodial here. So where it says H, we're going to substitute it with this full formula here in order to arrive at the custodial cost. So I'm walking through this really quick on this next slide, but we're not doing a sample problem of it, and it's not on the homework. So I just wanted to let you know. But basically, so what we do here, taking that 8 and substituting it for that 180,000 plus 0.2C, I plugged that in there, and then I solved for C by isolating the custodial cost off to one side, which gets to, so 120,000 plus $45,000, which is 25% times the 180,000, plus the 0.25 times 0.2C, which is 0.05C. So it gets you to 165,000 here plus 0.05C. So if you subtract 0.05C from either side, you've got C on this side minus 0.05, gets you to 0.95C equals $165,000. Solving for C gets you to 173,684.21. Now, this is kind of a bear of a calculation. Looking on the human resources side, you then do the same thing. You insert the C formula in place of the H that was in, I'm sorry, in place of the C in this formula and solve for that. Now, this is possible to do it by hand only if you have just 2 support departments. In real life, you're probably going to have 3 or 4, and the math just becomes completely impossible to do by hand. I mean, it's not impossible, but it would be insanely time consuming, and you need to use matrix math to make it all work out. So in theory, this is the most accurate method to use, but it's also the most cumbersome. So you'd really just need to be using software if you were going to use the reciprocal method. So, I mean, there's a variety of ways you could do that. We're not going to go through this just because the math is so extensive in this class, but I wanted to throw this out there so that you know that this method exists and that it is the most accurate method to use, even if it is the most expensive and cumbersome to apply. Okay. So that gets us to the last part of our chapter here, which is going to be talking about costing out different product mixes and profit goals. So, so joint product costs are the next topic that we have out there, which are costs for producing multiple products. So let's say we have multiple product lines, and looking at an example with coconuts. So if you take just like whole coconuts, you can use those to make coconut meat, like the white stuff that comes out of the coconut, shredded coconut. You can also make coconut water that people drink, coconut milk that people use for cooking, coconut oil, coconut cream, which is concentrated coconut water and milk and oil, coconut butter, flakes, sugar, etc. So a whole bunch of different things you can make with coconut. And coconut oil and coconut vinegar are valuable for cosmetics and skincare. So lots of products you can make with coconut, right? Now, in order to use coconuts, you have to plant, cultivate, and harvest them. You have to ship them to a manufacturing facility, sanitize them so they don't get all rotten, and sort them out. They get husked, and the coconut water gets separated from the meat to make all of the subsequent products. So there's a lot of labor and equipment costs. Now, the joint products are when you have a single production process that happens. So those are all the costs that happen up to the point where you say, hey, we've decided we've got this husked internal coconut part. And the split off point is when we say, hey, I'm going to take part of this and use it for making, say, coconut oil, and part of it and use it for making coconut milk with these mass amounts of coconut. All right. So the split off point is where you decide to do separate things with your products. And then any costs that happen after the split off point are considered to be separable costs. And those costs get charged only to the individual products. So all of the joint costs up to the split off point get assigned to all of the subsequent products, whereas the separable costs only get assigned to their specific products that they're related to. So those joint costs are the ones that you can't really say they were only for a specific product. All right. So with the coconut, the split off point happens when the coconut water and the meat are separated from the coconut husk. So you're physically separating the three sections of the coconut, the husk, the meat, and the water that's in the middle. The company can use the water and the meat to create other products. And from that point on, all the costs are separable. Okay. So keeping that in mind, we're going to talk about how to calculate what the joint product costs are using a couple different methods. Okay. So byproducts are when you have stuff that's created during a process that have minimal economic value. So looking at our coconuts, right? We remove to gather coconut water and meat. The water and meat are joint products because they are the result of one joint production process, and the husks are a byproduct of that process. They're kind of like a waste product. They have a little bit of value, but they're not a core product, and they're not a significant cost or a significant revenue generator for us. So we don't really consider them as our main product. So the joint costs up to the point where you split all this stuff apart is $50,000 per month. And the company can produce 20,000 pounds of coconut water and 80,000 pounds of coconut meat. All right. So the coconut water and meat can be sold as they are without any further processing for $2.50 per pound for coconut water and $3 per pound for coconut meat. All right. So we could sell the stuff as it is, or we could process it further. And so that's sort of a key strategic question that we look at for a company based on how much additional money would we make incrementally from doing more work versus how much additional cost would we have. So do the separate costs of producing extra stuff after doing more work. Does that make us more money than if we were to just stop where we were and cost it out there? Okay. So we can process out coconut water further to make coconut ice, which costs $20,000, but we can sell coconut ice for $2.75 per pound. We can also process the meat further to produce coconut milk, and that costs $150,000, but will result in 100,000 pounds of coconut milk, which sells for $5 per pound. So $500,000 of additional revenue for $150,000 worth of additional cost. So looking at that here we got a diagram, right? So $50,000 in processing to get it to that split off point. From there, if we were going to sell the coconut water, it would be 20,000 pounds at $2.50 per pound. So that would get me to, hold on. So that gets us to $50,000. Let me make a note on here. Whoops, there we go. Had my pencil out. Okay. There we go. So if we do that here, we're at 50, yeah, $50,000. And down here, we would be looking at 240,000, right? So 80,000 times three. Now we're looking at 500,000. Whoops. Oh my goodness, I lost my annotation stuff. Here we go. Here we go. There we go. I accidentally right clicked. Okay. So, but it costs us 150,000, right? So incrementally, we're making 350,000 here. All right, here it would cost us 20,000. Let's see, for this one, we would get 55,000. Now, here we're going from 50,000 to 55,000, but it's going to cost us 20,000 of additional processing. So I would say, yes, we would want to do the coconut milk because we make 350,000 versus 240,000, but here we would make only 35,000 versus 50,000. So it looks like it makes more sense to do the coconut water than the coconut ice. I'm going to cross that one out. And then it makes more sense to do the coconut milk than the coconut meat in this case. Okay. Let's look then at an example here for joint costing and profit per gallon in problem number 5. Here. We've got a biochem company and they incur $180,000 in joint costs. Oops, here we go, wrong one here. There we go. All right, and we're going to produce 34,000 gallons of RX1 and 46,000 gallons of RX2. So I'm going to just go ahead and start making a diagram here. So we're going to have physical units, RX1, RX2. And RX1 is sold for $4 per gallon. Okay. So okay. And biochem allocates joint costs using the physical units method. Okay, so a couple different methods. We could assign things based on various methods. Just like we were looking at our support department costs, you pick which measurement you want to use in order to allocate things out. So the physical units method, basically you say, all right, how many units are we making and what are the costs that are incurred? So in total here, we've got 80,000 units, physical units here, all right? So looking at how many units we have, we're going to assign a percentage of cost here based on how many units under this physical units method, okay? So here, we are going to have 34,000 divided by 80,000, which is 0.425 or 42.5% of our units. And here we're going to have 46,000 divided by 80,000, which is 0.575 or 57.5% of the cost. Maybe I'll label this proportion instead of percent since I have it in a decimal point here, just to make that a little more clear. So to allocate that out then, we have a total of $180,000. We're just going to assign the 180,000 times whatever proportion this is. And then that gets the amount for each department from a total cost perspective. And then what you want to do though is you need to allocate this out also based on a unit basis. Okay, so this is the total. And then to divide that out per unit, you would take the cost being allocated. So E5, $76,500. We're going to divide that by the number of units, which was 34,000. Okay. B6 divided by B6. There we go. All right, so yeah, so the cost per unit is the same, right? Now, we need to, they're asking us for the profit per gallon, right? So revenue per gallon minus the cost per gallon. And both of these have the same cost per gallon, right? So for RX1, our revenue per gallon, it sells for $4, right? So $4, and the cost is 2.25. So that gets us profit per gallon, $4 minus the 2.25 of $1.75. And then for RX2, we had a sale price of $6 and a cost of $2.25. So that one, RX2, has profit per gallon of 3.75, but they're just asking us for the RX1, so that's the $1.75. Okay, so that is the physical units method. All right. Now, the next method that I want to talk about is the sales value at split off method. Okay, so for the sales value at split off method, then you actually want to look at, okay, what is this worth at the time we split it off? All right, so let's see, which problem do I have here? 1 second. So I don't have a sample problem that's based on the sales value split off. So I'm going to walk through it really quick here using this existing problem number 5 that we looked at. You do it very similarly to the physical units method, only instead of doing it based on physical units, you say, hey, what is the sales value? Okay. So the sales value here, if we're making 34,000 units and can sell it for $4 per unit, is 136,000, and for the other product, it would be the $6 times 46,000, which is 276,000. So the total sales value here is 412,000, and the percentage of or the proportion is 136,000 divided by the total of 412,000, which is 33%, and then 276,000 divided by 412,000, So essentially 67%. So then you would take that and you would multiply that times the cost. So this would be 0.33 times 180,000. 0.67 times 180,000. So that's what would get allocated under the sales value at split off method. Okay. All righty. So, and then ultimately, you're going to choose to distribute things based on the method that typically will maximize your profit. Okay, so let's look really quick at problem number 6 here in the in-class exercises. Add another sheet here. So we have Study Incorporated, and they're using joint production process costing. $50,000 that produces 60,000 pounds of sunflower oil. I'm going to put sun oil and sun meal. Okay. So let's see. So 60,000 pounds of sunflower oil and 20,000 pounds of sunflower meal. They can be sold oil for $1.75 a pound, and the sunflower meal can be sold for $1 a pound. All right. Now, this is if we sell these as is. All right. So this would be, so the sales value would be 50,000 times $1.75. Okay. If they choose to make it as is versus 20,000, so it's $1 per unit. So total is 125,000 in revenue split up. Okay. Now, if we if we decide to process further, we can spend another $60,000. I'm going to just put cost up to this point is $50,000. Okay. Of which we can assign this based on various methods. So I'm just going to leave this here for right now. Now, if we were to split off further here, we would have additional cost. And we can process the oil further to produce 40,000 pounds of sunflower cream. And so that would be new units of 40,000 and sales price of $8 per pound. Okay. I don't know why I always leave the first column blank. Okay, so the new sales then would be 40,000 times 8, okay, or 320,000. And that had additional costs here. I'm just going to label that the costs here in red so we can keep track of those. All right. So regardless, we're going to have 50,000 in costs. And so if we choose to split this off, though, by the way, the new sales that we're going to get is going to be this amount right here. Okay. We're not going to get this and this. This goes away and we do this instead. All right. So what we're hoping for is that we would have additional net realizable value here. Okay. So the net realizable value method is another method that you can use to determine whether you should keep things as they are or process them further. And so our new net realizable value is what would be the profit if we were to process this out as far as we possibly can. Okay. So in this case, let's see here. Let me look here. Make sure I've got all my costs here. $50,000 up here. Okay, we can spend, oh, sorry, $60,000, not 40. Okay, make sure I got the right one here. I'm just reading through. 40,000 pounds of sunflower cream, sell for $8 a pound. Okay, and then the sunflower meal, we could spend an additional 30,000 here if we wanted to. And that would get us to 15,000 pounds of sunflower flour. That's a mouthful, sunflower flour. And that can be sold for $1.50 a pound. Okay, so the new sales here then would be 15,000 times $1.50, which would be 22,500. Okay, so looking at this, if we were going to maximize profit here, I'm just going to make this a little wider. So our new net realizable value here is going to be the 320,000 of new sales minus the $60,000 right there. So 260,000 after additional processing. And then over here, it would be loss of 7,500. We probably don't want to do that one. So to me, it looks like our best course of action here would be to do the 260,000 from the top one, right? And then down here, we would have sales of sun meal, right? For 20,000. And then we would also have to subtract out, though, our original 50,000 in costs, right? So this number here includes this, right? We're going to ignore this because we're not going to do this additional part, but we still have to subtract our original $50,000 in costs. It's going to get us to $230,000 if we maximize this, right? So we don't want to do this one because it's negative. So this one will provide us more benefit here. Because originally we would have had 260,000 in sale, or we would end up with 260,000 net here for the additional processing. This is only making 150,000 there. So that gets us 230. Okay. So looking again at the net realizable value method, then let's go out and look at problem number 7. We're almost done here. So for problem 7, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to delete all of these here and reuse this. Oh, whoops, let's not do that. Actually, let's leave that there and delete these. There we go. Because then I can reuse some of these formats. All right. So we've got Florange growers, and they use joint production costs of $75,000 to produce 20,000 pounds of orange juice, right? So OJ and costs of 75,000, right? And then 5,000 pounds of pulp. Okay, so we can sell the juice for $2 a pound, and pulp can be sold for 50 cents a pound. Now, so that would get us to $40,000 in sales for orange juice and $2,500 in sales for pulp. Now, if we choose to process the orange juice further, we can make 2,000 pounds of essential oil and the cost is 50,000. And pulp can be sold for 50 cents a pound, or we can process further to make 15,000 pounds of feed stock at a cost of $3,600. Okay. Pellets can be sold for $1.25 a pound, and the oil can be sold for $100 a pound. Okay, so the new sales then would be 200,000 for the oil and $18,750 for the pelletized feedstock. And then the net realizable value is the new sales minus the additional cost. So we would have a net realizable value of $150,000 for the orange juice versus $15,150 for the pelletized feedstock. Okay. Now, the question they're asking us here, though, so we have to calculate out this net realizable value to figure out, like, hey, what is the value here for each of these, right? And we have to calculate out now under this net realizable value, we're going to assign our joint cost based on that net realizable value. Okay, so now we're going to figure out here, let me make this a little wider here. What is the proportion of the total net realizable value? I'm going to add those together. Our total net realizable value for the two of those is 165,150. And so this one is going to be of that 90.827%. And that one is 9.173%. Okay. So then to assign the costs, we would just take those proportions and then assign that to the joint cost. So taking that proportion times the 75,000 in original joint costs that we had. Okay. And let's make that a little wider there. There we go. I'm going to put those into 2 digits because they want us to round 2 decimal places. Oops, what is it? There we go. All right, so that's where we get for our costs here. We'll scroll that over. So the joint costs then for the essential oil would be the 68,119.89, and then for the pelletized feedstock would be 6,880.11. Okay, so pretty similar to what we did in the previous problem where we calculated out the net realizable value, and then we just assigned out the next step we did here was taking that $75,000 in joint costs and assigning those out based on the proportion of the new net realizable value for each of those. All right, so last problem that we have here for this chapter is problem 8 here. And problem 8 here, we've got, we are also looking at a net realizable value problem here. So I'm going to, let's see, let's make this into a formula here. C8, before I get rid of this. But I can use that on the next one since I coded these. And then I can just fill in my numbers that I need here and reuse this format. Okay, so we have two products, product A, product B, and we are going to be creating product and a byproduct. And this is the financial information. They want us to calculate the net realizable value here. Okay. Let's see. So allocated joint costs, we've got 49,000 in allocated joint costs. And we've got revenues of 90,000. This one's actually doesn't look like it's too bad here. So revenues of 90,000, joint costs of 49,000, and separable costs of 15,000. And they want to know what is the value of their byproduct during the period if they have joint production costs of $50,000. Okay, well, calling out here, all right, if we have joint production costs of $50,000 and we assume basically that the byproducts are going to be a break even on here as far as these costs go. So so there's two ways you can do that. You can either treat the byproducts as a distinct product and add them in, or you can just assume that they are a break-even amount. So in this example here, it looks like 49,000 of the $50,000 of joint production costs are being assigned out to our main products, leaving $1,000 that is being assigned to the byproducts. So if we assume that those are a break even, basically, then that would mean that we would have $1,000 that were allocated out for those costs at a break even. So that's going to be $1,000 there. So 49,000 or 50,000 minus the 49,000 that's allocated out would mean that we assigned $1,000 worth of value to the joint cost. Okay, so that is the last problem for problem 6 then. We will go ahead and start with chapter 7 on Wednesday. There are more examples of some different additional examples of all of these allocations are located out in the slides and in the textbook if you need further examples to look at. So let me know if you have any questions.